in Facebook, let's just use Facebook because it's the easiest example. There are only 3 optimizations that I can choose from for how Facebook's going to choose to allocate my media. I don't actually get to choose how they deliver my ads. It's 7-day click, 1-day view, 7-day click, or 1-day click. Those are the only optimization settings that exist.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Perfectly Mentored. I'm your host, Jason Portnoy. On this episode, we bring back Common Thread Collective agency founder, Taylor Holiday. We're talking everything e-commerce, Facebook ads, marketing, growing a business, attribution, everything you need to know if you're in the e-commerce space. You're going to want to listen to this episode closely, maybe bring out a notepad and a pencil, take some notes. This was a good one. Check it out. Taylor, welcome back. It's good to have you back here.
It's good to be back, man. We played the calendar dance together. We figured it out. We found a common spot on the open available time, and we made it happen. So I appreciate it.
Well, you went out for a lot of dinners, I'll tell you that much. Can't respond. Out for dinner. We'll respond soon. Out for dinner. So good to see you're not like 450 pounds with the amount of dinners that you're at. You're good. You're looking good.
No, just trying to stay married, man. You know how it goes. If I pull the phone out at dinner, that doesn't go over very well. So try and keep it in the pocket.
I hear you. Look, we're talking. What is it? Or Tuesday, 2 days after. Probably one of the worst bugs in Facebook history, as far as I've been running ads. Probably one of the worst, if not the worst. Talk to me a little bit about the state. Since we last spoke. I think we spoke right in the heart of like after iOS 14.5 came out. What's the state of e-commerce in your mind right now based off the changes that have happened over the last year or so?
Yeah, it's a choppy time. It's hard to totally get your head around because there are lots of examples of things going well. We have lots of customers for whom things are successful. You're hearing lots of those stories and they're out there. There's also a lot of struggle. A lot of brands that weren't able to raise that next round, that ran out of cash, that were struggling with predatory debt and haven't been able to get out of it. And then there's people sort of just grinding it out, making it through it. And it's really a pretty broad spectrum where I don't know that there's really a consistent experience. Like if we think about COVID, we all sort of had a shared tailwind, right? That was pretty industry wide. Whereas right now, it doesn't feel like there's a consistent industry pattern. It feels pretty choppy and that there's a lot of different things occurring, which makes it kind of hard to sort out what the macro trend is really.
It's funny because like I'm looking back and we were having this talk with the team and clients. I can't remember a period where it's been like 4 years where LY makes no sense. We're like comparing to
totally.
like for like 3 years in a row, you can't look back because every year had something happen and something we went through. And as far as I've been in business, I've never seen that because LY used to be the staple. How are we doing compared to last year? How are we doing compared to last year?
Well, it's like if you go look at the curve of sort of the classic graph that we all got, so attached to seeing, which was the sort of the e-commerce growth over time, there's like a decade of really consistent, steady, compounding growth that was like very stable and then of course COVID, and it's been this like now this really extremely volatile last few years. And I think you're absolutely right. And not only does that mess with LY comps, but any type of data modeling that you're trying to do, whether it's looking at retention curves, whether it's looking at spend to CAC relationship, anything that you're attempting to be predictive about, it really messes with your data set because there's so many wildly variable inputs into any model that you're trying to construct. So it makes it hard to create expectation for the future right now and be accurate about it.
And it's almost like every year there's a new North Star metric. Right?
Can you hear that, by the way? Sorry, I don't know, Jason.
I just saw you on the video, and I saw everyone else look up in the sky. But
sorry, it looks like there's some sort of construction. I didn't know if you could hear it, but if
everyone
you can't,
looked up, and I can't hear it. I just saw everyone look up to the ceiling there.
Okay, sorry.
I was just saying, like, there always seems to be this like shiny North Star, right? That everyone keeps chasing. It was ROAS at one point, and then it was MER, and then it was, and then it was, what my triple whale or North Beam is saying like everything is. There just keeps to move. So if you had to sit there and tell e-com store owners, like, forget these shiny metrics, this is the number that matters. And I know like money in bank is always probably the most important one. But how can they judge their marketing properly?
Well, so I think that what happens is this is all related to the availability and cost of capital. It determines the actual right answer here. Because I think it's easy to assert that there is a right answer for every moment in time. And what I've actually reflected on a lot over looking out at the last decade is that I think in having a sort of singular mindset that like profit, or we would talk a lot about contribution margin as marketers, is the ideal thing to drive towards. I would argue that 6 years ago, that was wrong. That actually the brands that won were the brands that took market share and leveraged the low cost of capital and available VC equity to drive market capture, right? And so in that instance, trying to like sort of adopt a bootstrapper's mindset and make sure that everything was first order profitable, well, it didn't work. The people that got rich in our industry, our peers who went public, didn't adopt that mindset, and they won the game for that period of time. But I think what happens is now the cost of capital is very high. Debt you can't get for less than probably 8 to 15% on your money. Maybe worse for a lot of early stage businesses. There's no venture dollars, or there's let's just say a lot less venture dollars pouring into ecom. So suddenly you're responsible for basically building your business through your cash flow forecast. So if you think about just sort of like three key financial documents, from the P&L to the balance sheet to the cash flow forecast, I would say for the last 5 years, people have moved in the direction of P&L, balance sheet, cash flow forecast. And the cash flow forecast was sort of an afterthought because you had enough cash and you didn't really have to worry about it. And now I think it's reversed, where people are building and managing their business through their cash flow forecast. And that's a very different way to operate an e-commerce business, and is right now, I think, the right answer. Now, a million exceptions here. We work with, companies that are part of Procter and Gamble or the Callaway ecosystem that have billions of dollars. It's a different game. It's a different process. But for most of the early stage operators that I think follow you and I, managing your business from their cash flow forecast and using cash as the primary indicator is a very different way to manage your business. And then to build marketing metrics on top of that help to create relationship between those two things. And that's where we would say, okay, move from cash to contribution, right? To now measures that sort of tie deepest into that: new customer revenue, efficiency, first order profitability. All those things, though, are about managing through the cash flow forecast.
Well, you're right. And we see the switch change of like customers who are once getting a 4x return and they were super happy, spend, are now coming back and being like, hey, I know we're getting 4x, but we're not profitable. We're not making money. Something has to happen. And now they're starting to see all this. What just 2 years ago was spend. We have 4x, we're going. And it comes back to, I think most business owners have no clue what their numbers really are. And
That's right.
It's fascinating how you could get to 7 figures and not understand and not know your numbers, not know what a customer is worth to you, what it costs.
Well, the reality is, in fairness to most people, what I would say is the actual answer to a lot of these questions is actually very difficult to get. And I would argue even the people that say they know their numbers, the problem with that idea is that the number changes all the time. So just think about something as simple as gross margin. Like if I were to ask anybody what their gross margin is, they would have a general averaged answer for their gross margin over some period of time.
But not per product.
But right. Yeah, exactly. And so what happens is that in any given period of time, the composition of what you sell changes. That changes your gross margin for that day. The return rate changes by month, so that changes the net outcome for that period of time. There's slippage and product loss and, all sorts of other things that cause these numbers to constantly never be directly accurate. And so it becomes, in our business, it's actually really, really hard in many cases to get your head around the numbers. And the other thing I think we have that's problematic in our industry is that there's no shared lexicon. Like if I say revenue and you say revenue, you might be referring to net sales and I might be referring to gross sales. If we were to say something like LTV, you might be referring to pure net value and I might be referring to customer lifetime revenue.
Or even what time period.
Right, exactly. And so when we say like get our numbers right, I don't think we do new entrants into our space a lot of help by making that an easy concept to even go after, because there's no real shared definitions of words. And so it makes it really hard to agree.
Well, I also think, I'll be delicate about how I bring this up, but there's been a lot of new people entering our space in the
Yeah.
last few years, especially during COVID. Everyone looked like a winner. Everyone was amazing. And when you used to get into your little Twitter battles, it was between like 3-4 people who knew the space, and now it's like 150 are commenting and weighing in on what you have to say with probably half the experience at most
Yeah.
of what you have. What's your thought process on these people? Because I'm one of those people that look at it and say, hey, when the tide goes out, like you'll see who's swimming naked.
Yeah.
But people are still not afraid to swim naked, I guess, to keep with that metaphor.
Um, I probably sit on the other side, which is that I welcome public critique from anybody. Like I think in fairness, I think that is offers the greatest opportunity for the greatest truth to be revealed. Is the more scrutiny any idea is subjected to, the more opportunity it is to be refined. And this is why I like debate, is because it forces me actually to a level of clarity and an obligation of honesty about my own ideas that, like, if someone can poke a hole in what you're saying and prove it to be not true, then it's worth reevaluating for yourself, because what I'm actually interested in is the truth, or the closest thing I can get to it. And so if I just keep my ideas over here in a bottle and I say I will only allow people to look at it and criticize it in a very narrow window, then I think I miss an opportunity for myself, which is that, now, don't get me wrong, sometimes it's not in good faith and people are just being, either clout farming and trying to get their mentions into your mentions or whatever it might be, and that's fine. But I think there are a lot of people, and I remember being this way when I was 23 years old. I thought I knew everything too. But that enthusiasm, that vigor for the space, like, I like it. I still get into it very often with my own employees about ideas that we disagree on. And I like the idea that there's space and opportunity to debate a premise, or an idea. I get in trouble for saying that word too much, premise, but yeah, I like it. I think that ideas are sharpened at the table of debate, and I think that it's mostly useful when it's people acting in goodwill, and I think that for the most part on Twitter, you get that. There are exceptions for sure. But Jason, I think you and I have had this relationship where I appreciate you pushing back when there's an idea. We may not always agree, but I think that we have a mutual respect for each other. And so it's like, hey, this is somebody that's smart, that I want to hear what they have to say. They want to hear what I have to say, and we'll hopefully both be better at the end of it.
No, in that regards, I agree with you. But it's when it comes down to like first of all, if we were both so close-minded in our own beliefs, we would never have been able to grow our businesses. So we have to
Totally.
have some open-mindedness to it. But for me, it's more of the who am I letting, like, what noise am I going to let in?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if I'm going to listen to everyone who's going to challenge my belief, at
Yeah.
some point you have to have the credentials to come up and challenge my belief. Not that I'm so superior, but because
Sure.
if I just listen to if I walk around and the drunk homeless man is busy
Yep.
spitting out ecom numbers to me, am I going to listen to them and reform my entire belief around what that person's saying? No. And I think a lot of people.
Well, I would just let's separate those two things. Because I would say, would I listen to them? Well, again, you're using a pretty extreme example in terms of the
Yes.
drunk homeless man, but let's just say a profileless picture with 0 followers on Twitter comments something back to them. To listen to them is one thing. To reformat my belief around it is something completely different.
Fair.
Right. And so I would just say, like, to listen, no problem. But you're right that if I am going to change my mind, the bar for that is high. Like, I would need more evidence. I need more proof or validation of the idea.
I'll give you a perfect example.
Yeah.
Right. CDC has hundreds of brands. Like, how many brands?
Yeah, across everything,
Okay.
between admission, everything else. Sure. Let's say a couple hundred.
So a couple hundred brands. Now, if you're going to talk about aggregated data and look at trends, where you guys put a lot of effort into doing that,
Yep.
and I'm a freelance media buyer, and I have one brand that I work on
Sure.
that spends $15,000 a month compared to your millions and
Sure.
millions of dollars a month. Again, maybe it comes back to everyone has a different idea of what numbers are, and we can't agree on things. But you can't sit there and say in your silo, no, this is working. This is what works. Taylor, you're wrong across millions and millions of dollars to spend. And play that game. That's kind of what I'm saying.
I think the key in both cases, and this is because think about us. There's just more tiers above us, right? Like
Yep.
Shopify can come and say, Taylor, your data set is inconsequential. We have
Yep.
everybody, right? So we all actually exist on that spectrum somewhere, right? And so I think the key is, in any case, whether it's us saying it, and I try and be really cognizant of this because we can fall into the trap of being too declaratory about our own data set, is to say that like our data says this, and to stop there and to avoid the danger, which is then inferring that that means the same thing for everybody else too. So if you have a one store data set, it is factually accurate, and I think defensible to say, for my business, this is what's happening.
Fine.
Right? In the same way that for me to come out and say, across our this much spend, this is what has occurred. But both of us start lying, me and the individual store, if we say, therefore, this is what is true for all of ecom.
But that's what I get so mad at this world at, is that there's, first of all, it doesn't really matter how much. If you're running an ad account one way and getting success, and I'm running an account a completely opposite way and I'm getting success, we're both right.
Right.
It doesn't even matter. There's no debate. Great. There's plenty of ways to run an ad account. Same way, if I hired a media buyer, a new media buyer tomorrow, and you hired a new media buyer tomorrow, and they came in with free reign, they may not follow the right, but if they got the results, and I'd be so open to hearing their other way.
That's right.
And it wouldn't mean I'd make every single one of my media buyers now change their strategy, because sometimes multiple strategies work.
Yeah. So of course, sometimes they do, but I don't actually think that's what we're after, right? I think we're after is the thing that works most often. Because I think this is actually, I think, a problematic idea that our industry exists in, which is that in many cases, the only validation that a strategy needs is that it worked once. And I would say that that's probably the biggest disease that we have as an industry in terms of how we critically adopt and think about ideas, is that we love the anecdotal case study of something working. I think a great example of this is like YouTube ads. There are, for sure, Canon, like whatever, there's all these examples of people that have made YouTube ads work. And so therefore, what we do with that idea is to then assign the likelihood of success based on the individual outcome. And I would just say that like that's sort of the opposite of what I want to do, which is I want to find the thing that occurs most often and use that as my default strategy, and then layer on the low likelihood outcomes on top, just like an investment portfolio, right? The reason most people build, an index into their foundational part of their investment portfolio is because over the longest period of time, it is the thing that works most often, most consistently. Now, it's never going to produce 100x, which you, if go invest in Uber or whatever, you might get there. But there's the likelihood of that occurrence is really, really low. And especially like this is the way that people talk about creative a lot, which is that there's this huge narrative that like the key to an ad account success is creative, because creative represents the largest upper bound potential change to the outcome. But really what I want to do is create the circumstance in which the most kinds of creative will work most often. I don't want to try and chase these really tiny percentile outcomes. I want to create the circumstance in which things will work most often. And I think that's really the job for all of us to consider, is what is the strategy that when we, especially like if we're people speaking to a broad audience, I think we should be really hesitant to share the thing that worked once and to be more interested in sharing the thing that works most often. And that's, I think, a difference.
But that goes back to, what was it, like almost a year ago, when everyone was talking about I'm talking about people following certain people saying they're pulling money from Facebook to put on TikTok. Right. When everyone was talking about, hey, we're going to pull off this platform. Facebook's no longer what it used to be. TikTok is the new rising star of it. And I'm like, 1 out of 7 brands that I've seen
maybe
are finding success on it. So when Facebook still is the most powerful and best robust advertising platform in the world, why on earth would I tell my clients to pull money from it and go somewhere else?
And this is where the hard part about this, and even as somebody who sells like services, right, is that most people don't actually think this way. What they actually want is they want you to sell them a dream, the possibility of something happen. And we we just lost a deal recently because I had a conversation with the primary point of contact afterwards, and got feedback. And basically the other person was presenting other channels as a big growth opportunity. And they acknowledged to me, they're like, look, I think you're probably right that it's not going to work, but like, I need a reason to believe in something. Like, I need hope. My business isn't growing the way that I want. And so rather than doing the deep work of altering the underlying fundamentals of the business, in that moment, they chose, because there was a case study that the agency showed where it did work once, that could be them. And I think that's like, the lottery of building a business. Like that's like a different strategy than the way that I would approach it.
Based on that, would you have changed anything?
So this is a tension I get in with my sales team all the time, is that when I think it's probably a limitation of mine is that I have a hard time declaring a thing without some personal belief or evidence in its truthfulness. Now, again, I want to be clear that I don't think that our competitor in this case was lying. They weren't. They were just sharing something that worked, and they were using that to infer that this could work for you too. And I do think that I have to challenge myself. I put a tweet out about this recently, to be more hopeful about the upper bound possibilities and to present them as part of the possibilities that could occur, and not to just get anchored on the median outcome. And I think that is a tension to live in the sales process, is to balance honesty with hopefulness in a way that gives both clearly and as succinctly and truthfully as you can.
But then how do you ethically go out and then pitch that, right? When it seems out of integrity for you, and ethically, yeah, it's very nice to sell them the dream. But if you don't believe that dream is possible, I think you're acting out of integrity. I personally, I've been this way. I've lost deals for the same exact reason, right? I stick to it. I'm like, this is what we feel comfortable. This is what we feel we could deliver. Anywhere else, I don't think it's the time yet. And they went with the hope and the dreams. And I've always had this debate.
So let's imagine. Home. Yeah, well, let's imagine we present it this way, because I think where you get dishonest is when you represent that the upper bound outcome is the likely outcome. But let's imagine I were to say, like, this is a thing we'll often do, is sort of a multiple scenario planning. So if I said, hey, we did a forecast, here's a 50th percentile outcome, here's a 75th percentile outcome, here's a 90th percentile outcome, 3 different results. Okay. And we believe that in order to achieve the 90th percentile outcome, here's what would need to be true. Here are instances where we've been able to accomplish that, reduce CAC by X percent. Now, we still want to acknowledge that a 90th percentile outcomes means it's only going to occur 10% of the time. Mm-hmm. But we as your partner are committed to working towards that outcome if it's what you need. Well, is that unethical? What do you think?
No, but what you say and what clients hear are sometimes 2 very different things.
Oh, totally. But that's not on me, right? Especially if I am in a written, documented format, because I agree with you. What they do get anchored to whatever number you show them, and that becomes the expectation. And that is a very human, hard thing to manage through. But I do think that this is where a good relationship, and the best relationships between service provider and brand, are when there's both sides take the responsibility seriously of creating shared expectations to what was actually said. And so I think that agent service providers have to do a great job of documenting that, to repeating it, to understanding the limit that people are drawn to the bigger number that you show them, and to not use that in a manipulative fashion, to bait and switch people around different ideas, because that is tempting for sure. And I think you can hold, and people have the capacity to hold, the idea that there are multiple possible outcomes here, and we are attempting to serve the best one, but that doesn't guarantee that it's going to occur.
Fair. Let's move on to another area on Twitter. Just because, like, I'm gonna. You're very nice to defend people on Twitter. So now let's go to the point where I know you're gonna have a harder time defending them.
Okay.
Attribution.
Yeah.
Right. I get this all the time, as I'm sure you do. Clients want as much data as possible, and my always pushback to the team is, why do they want it first and foremost, and what decisions do they want to make off of it? Because that will be the data we give them.
That's right.
Right. Because I think it has to be in line with a goal.
That's right.
But every client wants all the data possible, and they don't even know what they're going to do with it. I feel even most media buyers say they want as much data as possible, but they don't even know how they're going to take that data or what to even infer from that data and do anything without all these attribution tools popping up. Everyone wants it. What I know your take, but for the audience listening who doesn't follow you, what's your thoughts?
So I think that what we're talking about in the previous conversation really applies here, which is the standard for believing something. And you said it really well, which I agree with, which is that your primary objective as a business, you want data that's indicative and presents to you the likelihood of that objective occurring. So let's imagine in most cases, okay, there's always exceptions. This is for all my Twitter nuance people. Jason, I think you're a Twitter nuance guy. You like to always sort of say that there's an exception. So I'll agree here.
I've been good. I've been good with you. I've been a fan more than more than a critic lately.
You haven't been hammering me too much.
I've been a fan.
So in most cases, people are trying to generate new customer revenue with their advertising spend. Like that's the primary objective in 80% of cases, right? In that instance, what I want to know then is what marketing metric that I'm using to measure my ad performance is going to be indicative of new customer revenue. So the way I'll describe it is that there's a law, right? Things that I cannot violate, which in many cases is, we would say AMER, new customer revenue over ad spend, acquisition marketing efficiency rating. Like that is an indication of first order profitability. And I set that target based on the gross margin of everything that I'm selling, hopefully at an individual product level, or at least at an offer level, right? And that is truth. I can't violate that because then I will lose money. Now it goes back to managing my cash flow forecast. Now, I then have the obligation to choose whatever marketing measure is most strongly correlated to that number. That's what I would contend, is it's your job as the marketer to now figure out which metric predicts that result, right? Like that's what you're looking for. And here's where I go, is that I also believe that you cannot disassociate attribution and optimization. So what do I mean by that? Well, in Facebook, let's just use Facebook because it's the easiest example. There are only 3 optimizations that I can choose from for how Facebook's going to choose to allocate my media. I don't actually get to choose how they deliver my ads. It's 7-day click, 1-day view, 7-day click, or 1-day click. Those are the only optimization settings that exist inside of Facebook. So what we always do is we go through and look at the measure of all 3 of those against new customer revenue, AMER. And what I'll tell you is that in almost every case, not every case, the best metric is 7-day click. And it is tightly correlated to AMER. It is a great indicator. Now, the broader your media mix, the more complex it becomes, the more organic traffic you have. All of these things make this harder. I acknowledge that. But also in every case, the default Facebook measure has a tighter correlation to new customer revenue, or as strong of a relationship to new customer revenue as any attribution measure I've ever seen. And oftentimes the attribution measure is worse. And so I would just ask any brand owner, why do you want a metric that has less of a relationship with new customer revenue than the one that the platform's using to spend your dollars, so that there's a relationship there, and that is available to you for free? So what is this doing for you, if not helping you better?
Tracking, it lost tracking, it lost all this. I want to pick up the missing pieces. I'm doing better than it's actually reported.
Right.
It's model. It's a modeled data versus the actual data.
Well, it's all modeled. First of all, this is like another thing, is that like every attribution models in the word have the word model, right? And whether it's linear or weighted or whatever special Rockerbox version or whatever it is, it's all a model. It's all weights based on incrementality studies and holdouts that are latent, that aren't done every single day, that don't feed back to Facebook, that there's all the limitations, and they've existed for 2 decades. Like this is not new, but the degradation of trust with the platforms is what's new, in a way that I think has caused a lot of this problem. And so what I have seen is that every time a new number gets introduced, it increases complexity, it slows the decision-making, and it causes people to make worse decisions. So for us, we come in and we say, all right, new customer revenue is the goal. First order profitability is the law. Which metric gives us the best indication of that? And we're going to use that to make decisions. And we aren't going to disassociate attribution and optimization.
And you raised a really good thing there when you said, this is what we want. This is the targeted outcome.
Right.
Now, a lot of times where I've seen where brands get burnt from the agency side of things, right? Where the red flags of being with 8 different agencies and hopping around is they outsource the desired end result.
Mm.
Meaning they jump on the call and they sit there and say, I don't know, what do you think our strategy should be? Or
Right.
I don't know, what do you think our outcome should be? And
Right.
I think if you're a brand listening to this, that is the key way, the number one way you're going to get burnt by an agency, even if they didn't really burn you, they're acting it with the strategy that they put in place for you, and they got
Right.
there, and it just wasn't right for you. Are you seeing that a lot as well? Just out of
Well,
curiosity.
I think that there's two different kinds of service that people don't always know which one they're buying. There is strategy as a service, which is something that you can go to seek out support in creating an answer to that question, to define the roadmap. Because I think a lot of entrepreneurs need help sorting through, what are my choices? Like,
Mm.
what do I get to choose from? Can I choose? Because if I just said to you, my goal is infinite profitability, that's not actually a choice. So I need you, smart person who does this all the time, to help me think about what is the best possible outcome available to me. That's strategy work. And there's people who are really good at that. That's where we want to sit more often. And then there's production work, which is, I have a strategy. I know what I want creatively, and I need you to make it, to execute it, to build it, to buy it, to do whatever. And that's a different kind of work from a different group of people. And I think oftentimes people will come and say they want strategy, but really they want production, and they're going to tell you what to do the whole time. And there's going to be conflict and tension, or they're going to come and think they want production and production level prices, but what they really need is actually strategy. And in both cases, I think it's the question, you can get either from the market. The market can provide you either service, but what do you want or need? And what I see a lot of is people who think they need production support, but they really need strategy, and they don't have a strategy.
Which is why I started the consulting business, right? So I have, on top of the agency, we have a coaching consulting business as well, because everyone who's kept coming into our funnel and speaking to either myself or a team member, it would always be, they don't know the strategy. They don't know what the right approach would be. And these people they're not, making $10,000 a month. They're 7-figure stores, and they still don't realize, but they've been spending on Facebook, or they're spending on other channels, and it just hasn't been profitable for them. And they need a change. And no matter, an agency can't operate that. They need someone who could poke holes in their actual business, in their financials, in everything like that, and actually give them a strategy to go forward, which is why actually I personally love that side more, because it allows me to go into the overall business of all the different business aspects of what they're doing. But I would still say most of them, the biggest issue is some sort of belief and mindset about what's actually possible, and what they should actually be looking for. I think to be honest with you, as much as we've seen e-commerce grow, whatever you want to say, e-commerce grew 10 years in the last 2 years, whatever it was, whatever thing you want to throw at it. I think there's more confusion
Oh, for
now for
sure.
e-com store owners than there has ever been.
Well, I think it's harder than it's ever been.
Mm.
Because again, we were playing the game on easy mode for a long, long time. It was easy mode because everything on Facebook worked. It was like pure arbitrage, right? Like, put up a product photo on white and it just was magic, right? Even the early days of Google, the auction dynamics were just far less competitive, right? Amazon, there was less brands. It was all less competitive. And so the game was on easy mode. Then it was like COVID, and it was like massive black swan tailwinds where all of retail shut down. The only place you could buy things was online. Like, and now all of a sudden we've got headwinds for the first time, where maybe not the first time, that's probably overstated, but in a very real way, where we're in a recession of some sorts, or at least some weird choppy economic pattern. There's endless competition. Every piece of digital real estate has basically been competed down to nothing. Every search engine results page on Amazon and Google is now riddled with competition from 1,000 different locations, right? And so the game is much more hard, and you can't get money, right? And that's the thing about e-commerce as a business. It's very capital intensive, right? You have to buy inventory, and if you can't buy inventory, you can't grow. And so understanding that, and then trying to buy inventory effectively right now is really hard, because predicting the future has been wildly difficult because of everything we talked about at the beginning. So it's a hard time right now for sure.
Look, inventory, even when I had a clothing brand 10 years ago, was hard to predict
So hard.
and hard to do inventory. But I also think it's now business owners actually have to be business people
Yes.
versus 2 years ago in the heart of things, it's like buying a lottery. It's like winning the lottery ticket every single week and then being like, I don't need an investment or financial strategy. I don't need to do anything.
Right.
And then you don't have that anymore. And you're like, oh no, I need a budget. I need to know how to invest my money. I need to know how to build wealth. I need to know how to do all those things.
Yep.
And you have to become financially capable, I guess is the word I'm looking for.
For
So
sure.
I think that's where we're at more than anything else is I don't know if it really got harder. I don't know if business, maybe online advertising got harder, but I don't know if business got much harder. I think now just business people actually have to use business metrics that they weren't using for the past few years.
Well, so I don't know. When we built Kalo, okay, let's see, so that was like 10 years ago. That was 2012. I knew nothing in comparison to what I know about business. When we were managing ads, we didn't talk about contribution margin. We didn't know anything about LTV to CAC. We knew nothing, but it all worked. Every ad that we put on Facebook worked. And so you like first order profitability wasn't like a concern. That wasn't a thing we were trying to solve for, right? Because we were so far beyond that from an outcome standpoint that the thing we weren't sophisticated enough to know was how fast we should have gone. We should have gone so much faster. We didn't understand it back then. But like in terms of the level of understanding of the tools, and then like if you tried to enter into that space today, like you would get obliterated because there's no margin left. Like when we went on to Amazon at the time, there were zero silicone wedding rings in the category. If I look right now, there are over 3,000 results for the phrase silicone wedding ring. And you can buy, I'm looking at it right now, here's a pack of 8 for $12. We sold one ring for $20 at like 96% margin. Like that, what's happened in that category is illustrative of what's happened in many, many categories, which is that the proliferation of competition has driven margin to zero. And so when you think about demand creation versus demand capture in a space like that, what happens is that every dollar that you spend to make people aware of a silicone wedding ring, you capture far less of that demand than you ever would have. And this is true for white sneakers and CBD beverages and like every masks, like every category you can think of. There's 1,000 iterations. And then even when a new one comes out, how quickly it gets knocked off. There's a big thing going on right now about the guys from one of the olive oil companies knocked off the other bottle from the other olive oil company, like Brightside and Garza or whatever those two brands are. Like it's just everywhere, right? Like there's 1,000 versions of everything at this point. And so I think that is what makes it much, much harder, is that the amount of demand capture that you get on demand creation, even when you do good demand creation, is just less. So it's not that you can't win, but the edges that you need now are more significant, I think, maybe than they were back then.
But you look back even before like online ads were such a huge thing, that was indicative of almost every business, right? At one point they grow and then they become fat. They become fat and comfortable, and they don't pivot, they don't iterate, and something happens. More people enter the space and eat up market share because they didn't. And I'm not saying this is easy. But I'm not saying it's easy, but I am saying that it's not a new thing. It's just happening at a faster pace.
Yes. So the faster pace is what, yes. So, but if you think about just Shopify, okay, so the whole premise is this idea of arming the rebels, right? It's the democratization of all the tools necessary to build a business, which is a beautiful idea that we all got hooked onto thinking was good for us. But the reality is the deterioration of moats is not good for you when you're trying to compete with everybody else. It's the opposite.
That's what I was just going to say.
Right.
If I was going to build a business, it would have to, or invest in a business, I'd have to see a clear moat. Like
that's right.
Yeah,
that's right. So in e-commerce, what happens though is all the moats get commoditized. So if you think about the idea that building a cart and a really great website used to be a competitive advantage, it's not anymore, because out of the box, everybody can have a beautiful website instantaneously. And so the marginal difference between any website that anybody builds is very small relative to what it was 15 years ago, right? And then you just sort of move through all of that, the supply chain, the marketing, customer service, like every one of these, as the tools develop in the ecosystem, the barriers to entry for the competitor to come in just get lower and lower and lower. That's why like the best categories tend to have some sort of manufacturing or supply chain advantage, where like the categories that are amazing now are like, you sell restaurant hoods for kitchens that are these like giant metallic assembly things. And there's like two people in the world that make them. And it's like two families that are battling it out. They're both making a bunch of money. And there's not a bunch of D2C brands popping up trying to knock off the thing by ordering it off of Alibaba and slapping a new label on it. Like, and so there's just, I think, a different set of things that emerge in this moment after everything's sort of been commoditized down to zero.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I just don't think business got, I don't think the fundamentals of business have drastically changed. And I think what did change is the need for people to understand the fundamentals of business that they didn't need to understand 2 years
Well, so
ago.
so do you think that let's use Allbirds, right, as an
Mhm.
example.
Yep.
Is that a good business or a bad business?
I mean, I'm looking at them right now. You talked to me 5 years ago. I like the business. Talk to me now, not really.
Well, so that's sort of my point, is that they've never actually been profitable,
Yep.
but there was no expectation of that 5 years ago. But all of a sudden there is. So the market dynamic demands a different financial rigor than it did 5 years ago from all of these players. Because when you're in a world where everyone thinks the future, one, there was this thesis that like you created operating leverage over time and that CAC went down and businesses got more efficient as they grew. And then everyone was like, oh shit, that's not actually true. And right. And so that thesis allowed a bunch of people to build businesses where they just went out and spent a bunch of money and never were obligated to profit. And that was okay. And those people all got rich doing that.
And got
And I
bought
don't
up.
think you could, right. And I don't think you could do that today. Like that
Which
wouldn't
is
work.
crazy, because I think you talk about first order profitability a lot, and I think that's nearing impossible for a lot of brands. I like just at least the brands
At that
I've come
scale. Yeah.
across, that's nearing impossible. And yes, and they want to grow as well.
Right.
So they want to
Yes.
grow and be profit, when it's like there's fundamentals of business involved, right? You
Well, that's what
can't
I'm.
just,
So now there is. Now, when you
but
say
I'm saying you,
fundamentals,
but I'm saying
what do
you
you mean
need,
specifically?
I'm saying if you could afford to overpay to acquire a customer, but they buy from you 15 more times, that's what you should be working on, not trying to rack your brain and trying to lower customer acquisition costs on a rising cost per advertising platform. But you could work on things that are more in your control than things that like, you look at all these people who need to be profitable on first acquisition. And I
Yep.
guarantee you, if I audited their account, and I'm talking about like the random small stores that come
Sure.
out there and say that, I look at their customer service, their retention, their focus on that is so minuscule and
Yeah.
so like barely there, that I don't think they have a say in needing to be profitable on first order
Well,
acquisition, because they don't know how to keep their customers happy.
yeah. So they have a broader set of problems. But I would just argue that like, even when you say business fundamentals, it sounds to me like what you're saying is the ability to spend money and generate a profit. Like this, like very core tenet of business is this idea that you invest capital and you make a return on it such that you create, an investable asset that generates value. Well, I don't actually think that was a fundamental premise 10 years ago. Like, I don't actually think it was an obligation of
It
the
was always
businesses that got built.
ROIC, like return on invested capital was always a metric that a lot of businesses
But
would
none of
follow.
them generated it. They weren't actually, they were obligated to
Fair.
a deck that told a story about it happening in the future, right? And a vision for what might occur somewhere down the line. But what you ended up with was a bunch of retail bag holders that like lost a ton of money buying the stock so that the people who sold the business and the investors made money.
Well, now
But
it's time to collect the chips, and they don't have them. So
right. So, but a lot of those people they're already in their vacation homes, and here we are, still grinding it out. So it's
but
like,
that had more to do with VCs than actually them having success on the platforms, really. Like,
well, but again, what is success? Like, this is where we get into sort of this philosophical debate about what it means. And I would just argue, like, I would trade
movement watches, right? Probably like when I started really on online advertising and really like getting deep into it, movement watches was the brand to study,
That's
right?
right.
'Cause they were coming out. But if you look at it, they were buying page likes. They were buying,
Yep.
they were running page engagement, right? For like 1 cent an engagement. Because if you look
Yep.
at all the engagers, they were all there. They built a brand that on perceived brand, right?
Yep.
At the time in order to become a brand, and then sold out. I don't know
Yeah.
about the probability. I don't know anything like that.
Yeah.
But
I don't either.
yeah, but that's kind of the case. I think just now it's maybe, look, I don't know. Maybe it's the ecom world back then versus now, but I don't know. For me,
I
it
think you
makes
should give yourself credit that today, that like the world that we exist in now is like, it's just a more competitive environment. It's like we went from, like, the metaphor I think about sometimes is like, when you're in a school, a small private school of 12 people, and you're the coolest kid, that means one thing. And then when you go to a public high school of 5,000, all of
yeah,
a sudden,
yeah,
there's a couple better looking kids. Somebody's in a little better shape. That guy's a little
yeah.
better athlete. And I think it's just like we went from, that's all that's happened to us. We went from a small pond of 10 of us splashing around. Like Ezra and I were talking this on my podcast the other day. He's like, 10 years ago, I could sell information products and make a bunch of money. He's like, today, guys like you and you and you are all giving stuff away for free that's just as good as what we were selling 10 years ago. And so there's no money to be made in info products anymore. And I think that sequence is just sort of what's happened in so many product categories. Like, think about how many like sock companies there are, and how many, like, it's just, we're in the biggest high school in the world trying to be the coolest kid. And it's just harder now than it was. It's like, than it was when we
Well, the
started,
problem
and
is we're
there were the
trying to
only game in
we're
town.
trying to copy the other cooler kid. And that's an issue too, right? So start a stock company, or Bombas comes out and they're giving, and Tom's comes out and they're giving money to charity. Oh, I'm going to start a brand and part of the money is
Yep.
going to go to charity. There's no innovation. It's just mimicking, and that's not going to build your brand.
Right. But it's also hard, again, like every idea has been done. So when you talk about innovation, the amount of things left to be innovated in a direct to consumer fashion is just like, again,
Correct. But I truly
back,
believe if you're a problem solver, if you could solve problems, you'll never be without making money.
no doubt, that it's not impossible. I think the argument we're having is it harder today than it was 10 years ago? And I think that's the part where I go like, yeah, like people will still do it. There's still people crushing it. There's lots of rad brands right now that are cutting through the noise and finding a way to make it happen.
Well, there are more billionaires now than there were 10 years ago.
Yeah. In e-commerce, you're saying?
No, I'm saying in general. I was
Yeah.
using business in general. I forgot who I was talking to. Maybe we should have kept this at just an ecom level.
Yeah. No, but yeah, I don't disagree. I think that's just a product of, time and growth. Like GDP moves, pretty productively up and to the right over time, as does the New York Stock Exchange over enough time period. We have a way of developing as a people. And I think our industry will do this. Like, I think right now there's a really healthy purging that's going to occur that is going to create better businesses in the future. I think the brands today that are winning are like really remarkably good businesses, like that have rigorous ability to generate profit. Like there's some incredible brands out there. So
before I let you go, I want to ask you this question then.
Yeah.
With this industry changing, drastically changing, like I'm talking about services, the agency space.
Yeah.
When I graduated from marketing, when I graduated from university, I was going to go take a job in marketing. It was data entry. That's what a marketing job was, right? So there was no like social media marketing. Now this has become a staple, right? You want to run a brand. When I first started, I had to convince people that Facebook ads work and to get off Google and to try this thing called Facebook ads.
Yeah.
Now everyone knows it's becoming like everyone kind of knows if you're going to start a business or you're running a business, you need to be involved in this. What do you think the state of like small, medium-sized businesses needing an agency, like the e-com store that's like the low 7 figures needing agency versus now starting to bring a lot of things in-house? What's your take on that?
I think small businesses are really bad at hiring people, generally speaking, because they don't have money. And so you're in a scarcity mindset. And so what you tend to do is you try to find the lowest cost person to do the lowest production level tasks that you can assign them. And at that stage, it's the opposite of what you need. And that's just the sequence of like survival that I watch small business owners go through. They actually need to figure out how to get the smartest person they can possibly find to give them help. And you can do that in lots of ways. You can do that through building an advisory board and giving out equity and getting a team of people around you that really know where you're trying to go, you can do that through agency. Like, to me, when people get into the agency versus in-house debate, I think they're missing the actual crux of the argument, which should be, how do you get the smartest person you can to work for your business? And if you know that person and you can hire them, you should hire them. If you don't, and you know them as a service provider, you should get that person to help you. The point is just, think about every hour of a really smart person thinking about your business as creating some amount of leverage. And if someone is a 10 on the scale of smartness, and in 1 hour, they create a 10 level of output. And if someone's a 1 level of intelligence in 10 hours, maybe they match that output. How many smart hours can you get onto your business? And what's the total value of that? That's how you should think about it. And so if you know a really smart person and they're willing to come work for your small business at what you're going to pay them, absolutely hire them. But that's usually not the case. And so I think that what an agency or an outsourced group of people represent is access to intellectual capital that you need to be successful. And you should try and get inside of that thing the smartest group of people you can to work on your business.
I agree. And I think another point of the agency is you don't have people living in a silo. So they're not
Right.
reacting purely towards one little thing. They could see things from a wide range of accounts and pull different data into things. And you're not getting one person. For the price
Right.
you're paying, you're actually getting a team of people. And if you were going to hire all those
Right.
people into your team individually, it would probably cost you more than you're paying an agency. Hopefully, I mean,
Well, here's what I would say. Like, everybody loves to listen to Moise Ali on a podcast. And my question is, like, could you get Moise to come work for you as an employee? The answer is absolutely freaking not. Could you get Jason Portnoy to come work for you as an employee? Absolutely freaking not. Could you get Taylor Holiday to come work for you as an employee? Absolutely freaking not. But could you get me to work on your business and be helpful? You absolutely can. And I think that that's where I would just contend that, like, if you want the smartest people possible to work on your business at a small, if you're a 6-7 figure store owner, you can't afford those people, but you can get access to them. And I would figure out how. And I think that's what often agencies represent, a really unique access to really high intellectual capital at a price that is actually stomachable.
you know what I love about this is that if I went back, 60 years ago and told someone that, hey, I'm going to have a whole talk with my competitor, and we're going to chat business and we'll figure out how to solve industry problems, they'd
Yeah.
laugh at me and be like, burn that guy down, right? Like,
Yeah.
and do that.
Just keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Jason.
Fair. Have your enemies on the podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Look, I think what you do for the space is incredible. Like I said, we butt heads a couple of times, but it's always out of like me maybe challenging my own beliefs. But sometimes I walk away from what you say and I'm like, man, you're right. Like, and I'm like, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't, and we both live life and we both continue doing what we're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think you actually are one of the smartest people in the room when it comes to talking and the value you give and the feedback you give to people. And your shit disturbing is also much appreciated.
Well, likewise, man. Like I said, I wouldn't waste my breath on interacting with you if I didn't value what I knew was going to be coming back. And so I learn through challenge and debate to sharpen my own ideas, and not afraid to change my mind. And I appreciate people like you being willing to push back and find ways that we can all get to a better truth. So thanks, man.
Love it. If for the listeners want to reach out, how can they find you?
Best spot at Taylor Holiday on Twitter. My DMs are open. Love to chat with anybody who is out there.
Awesome, Taylor. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Thanks, buddy.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want, check out our most recent video over here. And this one is the one YouTube thinks you'll like. But if you really enjoyed watching, please do me a favor, like and subscribe over here. Thank you so much.